The sky over London did not scream. There was no warning siren, no drone of engines, just a sudden supersonic silence, followed by an explosion that could level a city block. It was a weapon from the future, delivered by the ghosts of the past. The V-2 rocket was the most terrifying piece of technology on Earth. It was built to destroy democracy. It was built to kill innocents. But the men who designed it were not rotting in prison cells. They were not hanging from the gallows at Nuremberg. They were being fitted for American suits. They were shaking hands with generals. This is the story of the Devil's Bargain. It was May 1945. The Third Reich lay in ruins. Europe was a smoking graveyard of concrete and twisted steel, but in the shadows of the wreckage, a new war was already beginning. If you want to uncover more secrets from history's darkest corners, please take a moment to subscribe and like this video. It helps us keep digging. The Soviet Union was advancing from the east, hungry for technology. The United States was racing from the west. Both sides wanted the same thing. They didn't want justice. They wanted the minds that built the Nazi war machine. The mission was top secret. The orders were clear, but morally impossible. American intelligence officers were told to find the scientists who built Hitler's wonder weapons. These were men who had used slave labor, men who were card-carrying members of the SS, and the order was not to arrest them. It was to hire them. Major Robert Staver sat in a jeep bouncing over the cratered roads of Bavaria. His head throbbed. The smell of Germany in 1945 was distinct. It smelled of wet ash, unwashed bodies, and burning pine. Staver wasn't a combat soldier. He was a hunter of technology. But what he was finding made his stomach turn. He had the list of names in his pocket, the Osenberg list. It wasn't a list of targets to eliminate. It was a shopping list. He arrived at the entrance of a mine in the Harz Mountains, the Mittelwerk. This was the heart of the beast. The tunnels went miles deep into the earth. Staver stepped out of the jeep. The air turned cold. He turned on his flashlight. The beam cut through the damp darkness. "Watch your step, Major," a sergeant whispered. "It's slippery." Staver looked down. The floor was covered in straw and rags. But it wasn't just trash. It was evidence. He saw the V-2 rockets lined up in the gloom. They were massive, sleek, lethal. But next to them were the sleeping quarters of the slaves who built them. "My God," Staver whispered. The smell was overpowering. Dysentery. Death. The tunnels were a factory of horrors. Thousands of prisoners from the Dora concentration camp had been worked to death here. They never saw the sun. They built the rockets until they dropped, and then they were replaced. And the men Staver was sent to rescue? They were the ones who stepped over the bodies to check the guidance systems. "Major, we have a situation," the sergeant said. "What is it?" "The Russians. They take control of this sector in 48 hours. The timeline had collapsed. The map was being redrawn. This entire underground factory, the rockets, the blueprints, and the scientists, all of it was in the zone assigned to the Soviet Union. If the Americans didn't move now, Stalin would get the bomb. He would get the rockets. He would own the future. Staver pulled a notebook from his pocket. He later wrote about the chaos of those days. It felt like looting a burning house while the police were knocking at the front door. We were stealing history. The decision was made instantly. Evacuate everything. But there was a problem. The scientists weren't just waiting around. They were hiding. The biggest prize of all was Werner von Braun. The boy genius. The aristocrat. The man who dreamed of space travel while wearing an SS uniform. He and his team had fled south to the Alps to surrender to the Americans, hoping to cut a deal. Staver found them in a ski resort hotel. It was surreal. The world was starving. But here, the champagne was cold. Von Braun stood by a window, his arm in a heavy plaster cast from a car accident. He didn't look like a defeated enemy. He looked like a celebrity waiting for his contract. The room was thick with cigarette smoke. Von Braun smiled, charming and arrogant. "I expected you sooner," von Braun said. Staver looked at him. This man had designed the weapon that terrorized London. "Pack your bags," Staver said. "We leave tonight." "My team comes with me," von Braun replied. "All of them. Or you get nothing." It was extortion. But Staver had no leverage. He needed the brainpower. He nodded. Back in Washington, the political situation was toxic. President Truman had signed an order strictly forbidding the recruitment of active Nazis. It was explicit. No war criminals. No ardent supporters of the Third Reich. But the intelligence agencies looked at the files of von Braun and his team. They were filled with incriminating evidence. Membership in the Nazi Party. Membership in the SS. Reports of them visiting the slave labor tunnels and stepping over corpses. If the files remained as they were, these men would be tried and hanged. They would never enter the United States. Colonel Holger Toftoy, the man in charge of the operation, looked at the stack of dossiers on his desk. He picked up a paperclip. He didn't use a stamp. He didn't use a pen. He simply attached a new, clean background summary to the front of the file with a paperclip. "Change the classification," Toftoy ordered. "Sir?" an aide asked. "That's illegal." "It's necessary. Make them harmless. They weren't Nazis. They were victims of circumstance." The paperclip was the tool that erased history. It was the tool that turned monsters into assets. The operation had a new name, Operation Paperclip. The race to the coast began. It was a logistical nightmare. They had to move 100 V-2 rockets and over 100 German scientists before the Red Army arrived to claim the territory. It was night. The train station was a scene of frantic motion. The sky flashed with distant lightning, or perhaps artillery. It was hard to tell anymore. Staver watched the loading process. He grabbed a crate. It was heavy. "Lift!" he yelled. Soldiers heaved the V-2 components onto the flatbed cars. The metal groaned. "Keep moving! We don't have time!" A young private looked at Staver. He was sweating, his face smeared with grease. "Major, are we really taking these krauts with us?" "Just load the crate, son." "They killed my brother in the bulge, sir. And now I'm carrying their luggage?" Staver didn't answer. He couldn't. The morality of the war had dissolved into the pragmatism of the peace. They loaded the trains, they loaded the documents, and finally they loaded the men. Von Braun and his team boarded the train not as prisoners, but as VIPs. They had played the game and won. As the train pulled away, the first Soviet patrols were reportedly seen less than 5 miles away. They missed the prize by an hour. The scientists arrived in America. They were housed in Fort Bliss, Texas. It was a strange purgatory. They were free, but not free. They worked on rockets in the desert heat. They wrote letters home. One scientist wrote in his diary, "The Americans are like children with new toys. They do not ask about the past. They only ask about the fuel mixture." But the past was not dead. It was just buried under redacted files. Decades passed. The Cold War turned the sky into a battlefield. The United States needed a victory. They needed the moon. And the man to take them there was Wernher von Braun. He became an American hero. He was on television with Walt Disney. He explained orbital mechanics to millions of children. He was the father of the space age. The climax of this story isn't a battle. It is a moment of silence. July 1969. The Saturn V rocket sat on the launch pad in Florida. It was the most complex machine ever built. It was a masterpiece of engineering, and it was the direct descendant of the V-2. Von Braun stood in the control center. He watched the countdown. The engines ignited. The ground shook. The rocket rose on a pillar of fire, carrying 3 American men to the moon. The room erupted in cheers. Men were crying. Flags were waving. It was the greatest achievement in human history. But in the back of the room, the shadows lingered. Von Braun whispered to a colleague, "It worked." And it did. But the fuel for that journey wasn't just liquid hydrogen. It was blood. The success of the Apollo program blinded the world. For years, the truth was hidden. But in the 1980s, the paperclips began to rust. The files were opened. Journalists and investigators began to ask questions. They found the records of the slave labor. They found the SS memberships. They found the truth about men like Arthur Rudolph, the manager of the Mittelwerk factory, who had been living comfortably in California. When confronted, Rudolph didn't deny it. He simply said he was following orders. He surrendered his U.S. citizenship and fled back to Germany to avoid prosecution. Official U.S. Army records confirm that over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were brought to the United States under Operation Paperclip. The government had made a calculated choice. They decided that the survival of the West required the help of the enemy. The legacy of Operation Paperclip is complicated. Without these men, America might have lost the space race. We might not have GPS, advanced jet engines, or ballistic missiles. The technological leap was immense. If you believe these stories need to be told, please subscribe to the channel. We bring history back to life, no matter how uncomfortable the truth is. We look at the moon and see a symbol of hope and exploration. We see the triumph of the human spirit. But history asks a harder question. We reached the stars. But we stood on a mountain of bones to get there. Some stains never wash off.